Hello and welcome to this ItaliaPass webinar Ready for Venice. My name is Shelley Ruel and I am the community manager at ItaliaPass, which is an online community for travelers to Italy. And today's presentation is going to cover local tips and some helpful things about getting around Venice so that when you're visiting, you can get around easier and feel more like a local in terms of some of the local customs and getting around. So before we get started, I just wanted to take a minute to go over what is ItaliaPass, because many of you are probably here because you bought a rail ticket with Italia Rail. So Italia Rail is part of a family of brands that also includes tours, car rentals, and hotels that have been working with millions of tourists exploring Italy since 1987. And our CEO wanted to help his clients to have the best trip to Italy ever, so he created this program called ItaliaPass. And it's a membership benefits program. So for $149 for an annual membership, you get over $650 in value for your Italy travel. So today, as I go through the presentation, I will be mentioning a couple of things about the ItaliaPass membership, just in case it's something that interests you to add to your own Italy trip to make it easier. There's quite a few benefits that might come in really handy for you depending on where you're visiting in Italy. In terms of what we'll cover today, first I'm going to start out by telling you about where you're arriving in Venice, what's the easiest way for you to get into the city center, because as you might imagine, moving around Venice is a little bit different than other Italian cities given all the canals. And so that will also lead into how you can best get around Venice. And then I'll talk a little bit about local restaurants and how to avoid some of the most common tourist traps. And then I'll give you a little bit of an overview of the different neighborhoods in Venice so that you can orient yourself. I'll also talk about how you can get some complimentary access to different sites and tours, as well as how you can get $100 off of an Italia Tours experience. And then I'll wrap up with a couple of lesser known gems in the city and some local tips. So let's go ahead and get started. So first of all, let's talk about how you're going to arrive if you get in by flight. If you're flying into the airport in Venice, what's the best way to get into the city center? So the airport in Venice is called Marco Polo. The code is VCE. It's about a half hour outside of the city center, depending on the transport method you use to get into the city. Now, there's several options for you from the airport to get into the city. So consider that we're in Venice, so you're going to have a lot of water transport options as your primary ways of getting around. So there's a water bus, and that's called Ali Laguna. There's an express land bus called ATVO. That's the company that runs it. There's an ACTV bus line number 5. That's also a land bus. It's known as the Aerobus, but it's not an express bus. You can also take a private water taxi, or you could take a land taxi to Piazzale Roma. So now the costs for each of these are listed there in the bullet points. The water bus is 18 euros one way. The express bus is 10 euros one way, as well as the Aerobus. A private water taxi is going to run you between 105 and 135 euros generally. And a land taxi is between 55 and 75 euros. Now, the different travel times for these options will run down in the same order. So the water bus is scenic. It's not very fast, though. It's going to take about an hour from the airport to get into the city. The express bus is about 20 to 25 minutes, and that's a direct trip right into the city. The Aerobus, being that it's not an express bus, takes a little bit longer. That's 35 minutes. If you're wanting a private water taxi directly from the airport, then you're going to have to walk to the pier from the airport terminal exit, and then the water taxi will take about 20 to 30 minutes. And then the land taxi to Piazzale Roma is about 15 to 20 minutes, depending on the traffic. So you have quite a few different methods here, depending on what you're looking to do, how quickly you want to get into the city, and what your budget is like. Next, let's talk about if you're going to be arriving by train. So this is going to be likely if you're coming from Florence or Rome or Milan or any other city that's serviced by train within Italy, if you're already in the country, or maybe you're flying into Rome and want to come directly up to Venice. So the train station is called Santa Lucia. It's right in the city center. In fact, you can see in these photos, it's right off of the Grand Canal. Now, you can see those like kind of square-shaped looking boats that are in the canal. Those are called vaporetti. Vaporetti is like the public transport system it is the public transport system. It's the method of public transport. So imagine in a large city like Rome, you'd be getting around on buses. In Venice, these are water buses, and they're known as vaporetti. The vaporetto stops directly in front of the train station, so it's very convenient. So if you arrive by train, you can hop on a vaporetto and get to the place in Venice that you're trying to get to. Now, how long will it take you to get to Venice by train from some of the major cities? This is a list going down from coming from south to north. You can see here in this list the different travel times by high-speed train. The high-speed trains are known as freccia trains. That means arrow, and there's different types of freccia trains. But generally, these are the travel times that you're going to find between the major cities to Venice. And also here you see a list of the approximate cost of a one-way ticket by train. So that's a very easy way to get into the city center. You're just going to arrive at the train station and get on a vaporetto. Now, a lot of times people ask us, should I rent a car when I visit Italy? It really depends on what your itinerary looks like and if you're going to be staying in the major cities or venturing off into some of the more rural areas, like, for example, the Tuscan countryside. So if you're going to stay in the main cities, we don't really recommend that you rent a car. It's just not convenient. You don't need a car in the major cities. In Venice, for example, you won't need you can't have a car, so it wouldn't be worth it. However, if your overall vacation is going to include, say, for example, going to like a farm stay in Tuscany, driving around to some of the more rural areas, then we do recommend that you get a car because trains and public transport often don't service these kind of more far-flung areas. And you can rent a car with Italia Drive. If you're an Italia Pass member, you'll get $10 off of your car rental. Now, some people are wondering about this access fee and wondering if they're going to have to pay an access fee to get into Venice. This can feel very complicated. So the first thing that you need to know about the access fee that was recently put into place, they put it into place to try to control overcrowding. So it's only for day trip visitors, not for overnight visitors. So if you're staying overnight in Venice, this doesn't concern you at all. If you're coming for a day trip, then you may need to pay the access fee. However, keep in mind that the access fee is different than the tourist tax. You will pay a tourist tax at accommodations, so check with your hotel on that. They will include it in the price, but you don't want to get confused between those two different fees because they're different. Now, if you're a day trip visitor and you're wondering, okay, so do I need to pay the fee? It's only in effect on certain high season dates. In fact, in this photo, you can see the red circles indicate the dates that it's in effect. So you'll want to look that up online. And it only runs from April to July because what they're trying to do is they're trying to control and reduce overcrowding during the high tourist season. And it's only in effect from 8:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. So again, for day trip visitors. The access fee is €5 per person if you pay 4 or more days in advance. It's €10 if you pay 3 or more days in advance. You can purchase your access fee. You can pay for it online. And I'm going to have a resource list for you available at the community that will have links to all of the things I'm talking about in the webinar. So you'll find out about that at the end of the webinar and get the link to that. Now let's talk a little bit about getting around Venice because of course, as you know, Venice is built on canals. So it's not like a typical Italian city where you're not gonna be getting around with the cars or buses. It's a pedestrian city that getting around, you're gonna be getting around a lot of times on water, which is different. So as I mentioned before, when we were talking about the train station, the main form of public transport to get around Venice are water buses known as vaporetti, or the vaporettos, the singular. The most popular lines are these ones. Line 1, which goes on the Grand Canal, and line 2 is an express line for the Grand Canal. Line 12 services the outer islands like Murano, Burano, if you're wanting to take a trip out to those. Here are the costs for public transport in Venice. You can buy a single ride ticket to get on the Vaporetto. It's a time limited ticket. So for €9.50, you can ride the system for 75 minutes total, unlimited rides. Or if you're going to be staying in Venice at least one night or more, you might want to look into getting a multi-pass ticket. They're available for 24, 48, or 72 hours for the following prices: for 25 euros for 24 hours, 35 euros for 48 hours, or 45 euros for 72 hours. So calculate how many times you think you're going to ride the Vaporetti, and then you can make a decision to see whether a multi-pass is the best deal for you. Now, the way that you can get these tickets is you can use contactless payment. So tap and go, you can just tap your contactless payment card, credit, debit card, or smartphone payment on the card readers directly on the Vaporetto. You can also buy the ticket from ACTV ticket machines, or you can use an app, the AVM smartphone app, and I will provide the link to that in the resource list. If you do get a paper ticket, you're going to want to make sure that you validate it on your first boarding. So the first trip that you take within that 75-minute period of time, because when you validate it, then that shows what time you boarded, and your 75 minutes starts from that point on. So validation is going to be in a machine where you're going to insert your ticket. It will stamp the time, and then it will spit the ticket back out, and you just hold on to it, and then it's good for 75 minutes. Lots of people want to know about taking a gondola ride when they're in Venice. Obviously, this is one of Venice's most iconic symbols. And so if you're curious about taking a gondola ride, here are a few things to know. Gondolas have official rates. They are regulated by the city of Venice. It's not that anybody who wants to can just become a gondolier. They have to be, they have to take a state exam, and it's monitored and regulated by the city. Therefore, there are official rates. So just be aware of that so that you don't get taken advantage of. The official rates are for 30 minutes between 9 a.m. to 7 p.m., it's 90 euros. And for 35 minutes from 7 p.m. to 4 a.m., so nighttime, is 110 euros. Note that this presentation is being given in July of 2025, so you do want to make sure that you check to make sure these rates are still up to date depending on when you're watching this. Now, you can take up to 5 people per gondola. You're going to want to confirm the rate and the length of your trip before you leave so that you're sure that everybody is on the same page. Some people think that all of the gondolieri sing when they take you on a gondola ride, but that's kind of more of a myth. It's not really necessarily something that happens every time that you go on a gondola. The gondolieri are skilled boaters who have to, like I said, pass an official state exam. This isn't a hobby, or this isn't, I mean, it is a tourist activity, but it's also something that is quite highly regulated. So don't expect a song. It's not really typical, but who knows, it may happen. Here is an overview of the neighborhoods in Venice. There are 6 main neighborhoods in Venice. They're known as sestieri. One neighborhood would be sestiere. And the reason for that is that sesto means 6th. So each neighborhood is like 1/6 of the overall neighborhoods. The neighborhoods are Canareggio, Santa Croce, San Polo, San Marco, Castello, and Dorsoduro, which also includes the island there that you see below. Let's talk for just a minute about restaurants and avoiding tourist traps. So if you want to go to some local restaurants, you're going to want to avoid the main tourist areas. So for example, you're going to try to want to go to the further ends of neighborhoods such as Canareggio, Castello, and Dorsoduro. So not near the Ponte dell'Accademia, kind of on the outer edges of that map that we just looked at, because obviously the main tourist areas are going to be right in the center. A couple of local specialties that you might want to try. Venice is famous for what are known as cicchetti at the Baccari, which are wine bars. Cicchetti are kind of like tapas in Spain. They're like little snacks, little finger foods, like you can see in this photo, these little bruschette looking kind of finger foods. Those are cicchetti, and you can try those at the wine bars. Another local specialty you see in the other photo is risotto al nero di seppia. Nero di seppia is cuttlefish or squid ink, and risotto is risotto, I think is how you would say it in English pronounced, but it's a rice dish. And that's a local specialty. Another local specialty is bigoli and salsa. That's a pasta with a typical onion anchovy sauce that's local to this area. Now, in terms of other local food customs, pizza is not as common in Venice. You're going to want to stick to Rome and Naples for pizza. It's not really as common in Venice as it is in other, like Rome and Naples are kind of the home of Italian pizza. Rome is a thin crust pizza, whereas Naples is a bit of a thicker crust. But don't expect to find pizzeria as a typical restaurant dish or food here in Venice. Coffee bar prices at the counter versus the table. You will want to be aware that if you take your espresso standing up at the bar, it's going to cost less than if you want to take your espresso at a table. And also be aware that you will almost always pay a supplement at the table. So just be aware of that. They're not trying to rip you off. It's a typical local custom to pay a table fee. Especially in the big tourist areas, those table fees are going to be more than maybe in some of the areas that are less touristy. Now let's talk for just a second about getting into the sites. As I mentioned before in the beginning, Italia Pass members do get a $100 off on any tour at Italia Tours. That is our sister company that offers guided tours with expert tour guides. Here is a list of a few of the tours that you can take in Venice with us. There's the Doge's Palace and St. Mark's Basilica, so a couple of the most famous sites in Venice. We were just talking about the Baccari and the Cicchetti. There is a food tour, Back Street Baccari, and that is $99 tour that if you have an Italia Pass membership, you can get absolutely free. There's also Venice from the rooftops with a Prosecco tasting. So lots of options here to have a really beautiful tour experience in Venice. So you might want to look into that. It's at italiatours.com. You can browse the different tours in the catalog. Here are a couple of the lesser known gems that you might be interested in taking a look at when you're in Venice. There is a bookstore called the Libreria Acqua Alta. It's in the Castello neighborhood. It's a very interesting bookshop. Acqua Alta means high water. And the reason this bookshop is named that is because the books are stored in bathtubs and even, as you see here in the photo, a full-sized gondola to avoid getting damaged when waters in the city rise and cause flooding. And there are even cats that wander through the bookstore, and there's even a staircase made of books. So it's a very photogenic place. You can take a lot of fun photos, and maybe you'll even find a book to take home with you. Another place you might want to check out is called the Square di San Trovaso. This is in the Dorso Duro neighborhood. This is a very small shipyard where gondole are still built. So you can observe from across the canal. It's a working gondola factory, shipyard basically. And you can even take a half-hour tour if you want. You have to contact the Squero directly to arrange a tour, and I will provide that link in the resources guide that I will post on the community. Last but not least, here are a couple local tips for you specific to Venice. Do not worry in Venice about getting lost. Venice is famous for being very, very confusing. The way that their streets are numbered and named is not what you will be used to. House numbering is not sequential, and the addresses go by the sestiere. So it's not like a street name, it's the sestiere name. And then the number is not necessarily going to be sequential. So for example, here you see this street sign that says Sestiere di Santa Croce. That's like local dialect, but Santa Croce. So you're going to see that it can be kind of confusing to get around. So just don't worry, you will find your way. Google Maps, if you have a smartphone, or Apple Maps is your friend, but just kind of take it easy because this is part of the local culture. Everyone tends to get lost in Venice when they're there for the first time, so just enjoy wandering. Build extra time into your itinerary. That is also a really good local tip. Secondly, as you can see in this photo, limit your luggage as much as possible because as you can imagine, getting around Venice, it's not as linear as you might expect in other large cities. Like you can see in this photo, going over a bridge, there's steps on the bridges, lots of canals. It's not easy to get around with lots of luggage. So if you're going to Venice, See if you can limit your luggage. Maybe you can leave some of your luggage in a storage space when you're going around the city, but try to find a way to make that more comfortable and convenient for you, because as you're walking around the city, if you're burdened down by a lot of bags, that can make it a less comfortable experience for you. So just something to keep in mind. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us for this webinar about Venice. As I said, there's going to be a list of resources and tips. You're going to visit the ItaliaPass community to find that. Go to community.italiapass.com and then look at the left sidebar and click on travel tips. And then when you open the travel tips page, you're going to see a box on the right. There's going to be the webinar for Florence, the webinar for Venice. Click on the webinar for Venice and you will go straight to the list of resources that we talked about. So you can click on all the links and find out more information. Hope you have a wonderful trip. And if at any time you have any questions about traveling in Italy, please do visit us at the community. Ask all your questions and you can interact with other travelers to Italy. Hope you have a wonderful trip. Buon viaggio.